spent her last moments fighting. This is my only child. My daughter will be 26, October 26th of this year.
Police complaint in the shooting death of an Amarillo woman August 31st paints a picture of a wave of lives that surveillance video contradicts. Dylan Black is charged with murder.
It was a warm summer night in Amarillo, Texas, August 31st, 2024. The bars had just closed, and the streets buzzed with laughter and chatter. A group of friends, young and carefree, decided to keep the night alive. They moved the party to a house on Avondale Street, a quiet neighborhood where the night seemed peaceful. But peace was the last thing they would find. As the hours passed, the atmosphere shifted. Uninvited guests began to arrive, dozens of them. The mood grew tense, voices rose, and the night took a turn no one could have imagined. By 3 a.m., the sound of a gunshot echoed through the street, shattering the night and leaving a young woman, full of life and promise, bleeding on the pavement. Her name was Felita Bailey. She was just 25 years old. But this is not just a story about a shooting. It's a story about a mother's relentless fight for justice, a family's struggle against a system that seemed to turn a blind eye, and a community left reeling from the loss of a bright soul. It's a story that raises questions about accountability, about who gets to walk free, and who is left to pick up the pieces. What really happened that night? Who pulled the trigger? And why? Despite overwhelming evidence, did the wheels of justice seem to grind to a halt? The answers are as shocking as they are heartbreaking. Before we uncover the truth behind Felita Bailey's tragic death, make sure to like this video and subscribe for more true crime documentaries. Your support helps us bring these important stories to light. Stay with us because what you're about to hear will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about justice. Felita Jovan Bailey wasn't just a name in a news story or a face in a photograph. She was a force of life, a young woman whose presence could light up a room and whose dreams were as big as her heart. Born on October 26, 1998, in Amarillo, Texas, Felita grew up surrounded by love and resilience. Her mother, Odessa Bailey, often described her as the family's hype woman, as someone who could make you laugh even on your worst day. Felita had a smile that was contagious and a laugh that could fill a room. She was the kind of person who made everyone around her feel seen, heard, and valued. Felita's journey took her from Amarillo to Dallas, where she graduated from Mesquite High School in 2017. She was a hardworking and determined young woman, balancing her dreams with a deep sense of responsibility. From a young age, Felita helped her mother run their family catering business, a testament to her industrious spirit and dedication to her family. She was the kind of person who would go out of her way to lift others up, whether it was through her infectious energy or her unwavering support. At the time of her death, Felita was working toward a certification as a dental hygienist, a career she was passionate about. She had recently moved back to Amarillo in January 2024 to be closer to her grandmother and other family members. It was a decision rooted in love, a chance to reconnect with her roots while pursuing her dreams. Felita was employed at Tyson Foods, where she had been working for 8 months, and was actively taking classes to achieve her professional goals. But Felita wasn't just about work and ambition. She loved life. She enjoyed singing, dancing, and spending time with her family and friends. She was the kind of person who could turn an ordinary day into a celebration, always bringing joy and positivity wherever she went. Her family remembers her as someone who cherished every moment, someone who lived life to the fullest. Felita's life was a tapestry of love, ambition, and resilience. She was a daughter, a sister, a friend, and a dreamer. But on the night of August 31st, 2024, her bright future was brutally cut short. What started as a casual gathering with friends turned into a nightmare, one that would leave her family shattered and a community demanding answers. What would you do if someone you loved was taken from you in such a senseless act of violence? Let us know in the comments below. And as we delve deeper into this story, remember Felita Bailey was more than a victim. She was a light that will never be forgotten. The night of August 31st, 2024, began like any other weekend for Felita Bailey and her friends. The group had spent the evening at Bodegas, a popular bar in the 700 block of Polk Street in Amarillo. Laughter filled the air as they enjoyed each other's company, unwinding after a long week. When the bar closed at 2 a.m., the night was still young, and the group decided to keep the party going. They moved to a house on the 1300 block of Avondale Street, where friends Antonio and Josue Marrero lived with their parents. It was supposed to be a small, intimate gathering, a chance to relax and enjoy the rest of the night. But what happened next would change everything. As the group settled in, the atmosphere began to shift. Uninvited guests started arriving, dozens of them. What began as a handful of friends quickly turned into a crowd of nearly 40 people. The house, once filled with laughter, now buzzed with tension. The Marrero brothers, realizing the situation was getting out of hand, asked Latoya Johnson, a friend of Feli's, to help them clear out the uninvited guests. But as they tried to restore order, the night took a dark turn. According to witness accounts, a confrontation broke out. Words were exchanged, tempers flared, and suddenly chaos erupted. Latoya Johnson was attacked by several individuals and dragged into the street. The fight spilled out of the house, drawing the attention of neighbors and passers-by. And then, at around 3:20 a.m., the unthinkable happened. 4 gunshots rang out, shattering the night and leaving 2 people wounded. Felita Bailey, who had been caught in the chaos, was shot in the upper torso and shoulder. Latoya Johnson, who had tried to protect her, was struck in the leg. Both were rushed to Northwest Texas Hospital, but for Felita, the injuries were too severe. She fought for her life, but tragically, she did not survive. The vibrant young woman who had been full of dreams and laughter was gone. The aftermath of the shooting was a whirlwind of confusion and grief. Amarillo police arrived at the scene to find shell casings from a 9mm handgun scattered across the street. Surveillance footage from the Marrero's doorbell camera captured the sounds of a large fight and showed a man in a New York Yankees cap, a ski mask, and dark clothing, later identified as Dylan Black, with what appeared to be a gun in his waistband. Witnesses reported hearing Black say something about shooting someone before the gunfire erupted. But the story doesn't end there. In the hours and days that followed, the investigation took unexpected turns. Dylan Black, the man seen on camera, was arrested and charged with murder. But as the case unfolded, questions began to arise. Why were there so many uninvited guests at the party? Who else was involved in the altercation? Stay with us as we uncover the shocking details of what happened next. Don't forget to hit the like button if you're hooked already, because this story is far from over. As the chaos unfolded outside the house on Avondale Street, Felita Bailey found herself in the middle of a nightmare. Witnesses describe a scene of utter pandemonium, shouting, pushing, and the sound of fists hitting flesh. But for Felita, the violence was far more personal. According to her mother, Odessa Bailey, Felita was not just an innocent bystander. She was targeted. Odessa recounts the horrifying details with a voice trembling with grief and anger. They tore her clothes, pulled her hair, and left her fighting for her life. My baby was assaulted by multiple men. She was just trying to defend herself, and then the gunshots rang out. The assault on Felita was brutal and unrelenting. Witnesses say she was cornered by several individuals, including Dylan Black, the man later seen on surveillance footage wearing a New York Yankees cap and a ski mask. Felita, who had rejected Black's advances earlier in the night, became the focus of his rage. As the confrontation escalated, Black allegedly drew a gun. 4 shots were fired in quick succession. One struck Felita in the upper torso and shoulder, while another hit Latoya Johnson in the leg as he tried to intervene and protect her. The sound of gunfire sent the crowd scattering in all directions. Neighbors, awakened by the commotion, called 911. But for Felita, the damage was done. She lay on the ground, bleeding and struggling to breathe, as her friends screamed for help. LaToy Johnson, despite his own injuries, tried to stay by her side until paramedics arrived. Both were rushed to Northwest Texas Hospital, but Felita's injuries were too severe. She fought for her life, but tragically she did not survive. The aftermath of the shooting was a blur of grief and confusion. Felita's family, who had been unaware of the events unfolding that night, received the devastating news hours later. Odessa Bailey recalls the moment she found out her daughter had been killed. "I couldn't breathe. I felt like my heart had been ripped out of my chest. My baby was gone, and I didn't even get to say goodbye." But the pain didn't end there. For 5 agonizing days, Felita's body remained unidentified. The hospital had released her to an unauthorized funeral home, leaving her family in the dark. When Odessa finally saw her daughter's body, she was horrified. She had knots on her head, bruises everywhere. They had torn her clothes, pulled her hair. My baby was treated like she was nothing. The assault and shooting that night were not just acts of violence, they were a betrayal. Felita, a young woman full of life and promise, was robbed of her future in the most senseless way imaginable. Her family was left to pick up the pieces, grappling with a loss that no parent should ever have to endure. Can you imagine the pain of losing a child in such a brutal way? Share your thoughts in the comments. In the hours and days following the shooting, Felita Bailey's family was thrust into a harrowing ordeal of confusion, neglect, and heartbreak. While the community grappled with the violence that had erupted on Avondale Street, Odessa Bailey and her family faced a different kind of pain, one marked by silence, indifference, and a growing sense of betrayal. For 5 agonizing days, Felita's family was left in the dark. No one from the hospital or the police department contacted them to inform them of her death. Odessa Bailey, Felita's mother, recalls the moment she found out her daughter had been killed. "I didn't hear it from the police. I didn't hear it from the hospital. I found out through the news. My baby was gone, and no one even bothered to tell me." The lack of communication was staggering. Felita's body had been taken to Northwest Texas Hospital, where she was pronounced dead. But instead of notifying her next of kin, the hospital released her body to an unauthorized funeral home. For 5 days, Felita's family had no idea where she was. When Odessa finally saw her daughter's body, she was devastated. "My baby was treated like she was nothing." The delay in identifying Felita's body raised troubling questions. Why had the hospital failed to notify her family? Why was her body moved without proper authorization? And why, in those critical days, did it feel like the system was working against the family rather than for them? The police department's handling of the case only added to the family's anguish. Despite the presence of surveillance footage, witness statements, and physical evidence, the Amarillo Police Department seemed more focused on protecting the suspect, Dylan Black, than seeking justice for Felita. Black, who had been seen on camera wearing a New York Yankees cap and carrying a gun, was arrested and charged with murder. But within days, the charges were dropped due to what authorities called insufficient evidence. Odessa Bailey was outraged. "They didn't even try," she said. "They had the video. They had the gun. They had witnesses. But they let him go. How is that justice?" Her frustration was compounded by the fact that the police had failed to notify her of Black's release, leaving her in fear for her own safety. "This man is out there walking free, and no one seems to care," she added. The family's pain was further deepened by the lack of communication from law enforcement. Odessa recalls calling the police repeatedly, only to be met with indifference. "They didn't even know my daughter's name," she said. "They couldn't tell me anything about her case. It was like they didn't care." As the days turned into weeks, Odessa took to social media to share her story, pleading for justice and accountability. Her posts, filled with raw emotion and unflinching honesty, struck a chord with thousands of people. A GoFundMe was set up to help cover funeral expenses and legal fees, but for Odessa, the fight was about more than money. It was about ensuring that Felita's death would not be swept under the rug. If you're as outraged as we are, share this video to spread awareness about Felita's story. Because this isn't just about one family's loss, it's about a system that failed them, a community that mourns with them, and a young woman whose light was extinguished far too soon. As the investigation into Felita Bailey's murder unfolded, the Amarillo Police Department faced mounting scrutiny. The evidence seemed clear. Surveillance footage from the Marrero's doorbell camera captured a man in a New York Yankees cap, a ski mask, and dark clothing later identified as 22-year-old Dylan Black, with what appeared to be a gun in his waistband. Witnesses reported hearing Black say something about shooting someone before the gunfire erupted. 4 shell casings from a 9mm handgun were found at the scene, and the ATF later matched them to a Taurus handgun linked to Black. But despite this seemingly overwhelming evidence, the case took a shocking turn. Dylan Black was arrested and charged with murder, but within days the charges were dropped. The reason? Authorities claimed there was insufficient evidence to proceed. For Odessa Bailey, this was a devastating blow. They had everything they needed, she said. The video, the gun, the witnesses. But they let him go. How is that justice? The decision to release Black sparked outrage, not just within Felita's family, but across the community. Many questioned whether the justice system had failed Felita and her loved ones. Lieutenant James Clements of the Amarillo Police Department explained that while Black remained a suspect, the charges were dropped pending further review of information and evidence. But for Odessa, this explanation was not enough. They're protecting him, she said. They don't care about my daughter. They don't care about justice. The investigation revealed troubling details about Black's history. At just 22 years old, he already had an extensive criminal record, including charges for burglary, assault, and multiple probation violations. Yet, time and again, he had been allowed to walk free. This pattern of leniency left many wondering how someone with such a history could be released so easily, especially in connection with a murder case. Do you think the justice system failed Felita and her family? Let us know your thoughts below. And as we continue to unravel this story, remember Felita Bailey's life was more than the tragedy that ended it. She was a daughter, a friend, and a light that will never be forgotten. In the wake of Felita Bailey's tragic death, her mother, Odessa, emerged as a fierce advocate for justice. Refusing to let her daughter's memory fade into obscurity, Odessa took her fight to the public, determined to hold those responsible accountable. I will fight for Felita until my last breath, she vowed. This isn't just about my daughter, it's about every family that's been failed by the system. Odessa's journey for justice began with a series of emotional social media posts where she shared the raw, unfiltered truth about what happened to Felita. Her words resonated with thousands, sparking outrage and rallying support from people across the country. She didn't just want answers, she wanted systemic change. This isn't just about one case, she said. It's about a system that protects the guilty and ignores the victims. One of Odessa's first steps was to set up a GoFundMe to help cover funeral expenses, legal fees, and the costs of pursuing justice. The campaign quickly gained traction, with donations pouring in from strangers moved by Felita's story. But for Odessa, the fight was about more than money. It was about ensuring that Felita's death would not be in vain. We're not just fighting for Felita, she said. We're fighting for every young woman who's been failed by the system. Odessa also reached out to local officials, demanding transparency and accountability from the Amarillo Police Department. She met with detectives, city officials, and even the chief of police, but her pleas often fell on deaf ears. They don't care, she said. They're more interested in protecting their own than seeking justice for my daughter. Despite the obstacles, Odessa remained steadfast. She organized community rallies, spoke at press conferences, and used every platform available to keep Felita's story in the public eye. Her determination inspired others to join the fight, creating a groundswell of support that could not be ignored. We're not going away, she said. We're going to keep fighting until we get justice for Felita. Odessa's fight is far from over. She continues to push for answers, demanding that the truth be uncovered, and that those responsible be held accountable. This isn't just about my daughter, she said. It's about every family that's been failed by the system. We're not going to stop until we get justice. If you want to support Felita's family, check out the link in the description to donate to their GoFundMe. Every contribution helps them continue their fight for justice. And as we move into the final chapter of this story, remember Felita Bailey's light will never be forgotten. Felita Bailey's story is more than a tragedy, it's a wake-up call. Her death has shaken the Amarillo community to its core, exposing deep flaws in the justice system and sparking a movement for change. Across the city, people are coming together to demand accountability, transparency, and justice not just for Felita, but for every victim who has been failed by the system. In the weeks following Felita's death, vigils and rallies were held in her honor. Friends, family, and strangers alike gathered to remember her vibrant spirit and to call for action. Signs bearing her name and messages like "Justice for Felita" and "No More Silence" filled the streets, as the community made it clear that they would not let her death be forgotten. But the impact of Felita's story extends far beyond Amarillo. Her case has drawn national attention, shining a light on the systemic issues that allow violence against women, particularly women of color, to go unpunished. Advocates and activists have joined Odessa's fight, using Felita's story to push for broader reforms in how cases of violence are investigated and prosecuted. Felita's story is a reminder that justice is not just the responsibility of law enforcement, it's the responsibility of all of us. By sharing her story, demanding accountability, and supporting her family, we can help ensure that no other family has to endure this kind of pain. This isn't just about Felita, Odessa says. It's about every young woman who's been failed by the system. It's about making sure this never happens again. If you believe in justice for Felita, hit the like button, share this video, and subscribe for more true crime stories. Together we can keep her memory alive and fight for a world where no family has to suffer the way Felita's has. Because her story isn't over not until justice is served. Felita Bailey was a beacon of light, a young woman whose laughter, kindness, and ambition touched everyone she met. Her dreams of becoming a dental hygienist, her love for her family, and her unwavering spirit made her a force to be reckoned with. But on August 31st, 2024, that light was extinguished far too soon, leaving a void that can never be filled. As we reflect on Felita's life and the tragedy of her death, we are reminded of the fragility of life and the importance of fighting for justice. Her story is not just a tale of loss, it's a call to action. It's a reminder that we must hold those in power accountable, demand transparency, and stand up for those who can no longer stand for themselves. Felita's family, friends, and community continue to honor her memory. Balloons were released on what would have been her 26th birthday, a bittersweet celebration of a life cut short. Her mother, Odessa, remains steadfast in her fight for justice, determined to ensure that Felita's death was not in vain. "My baby's light will never go out," Odessa says. "We will keep fighting until we get the justice she deserves." As we close this chapter, we ask you to remember Felita not as a victim, but as a vibrant, loving, and ambitious young woman who deserves so much more. Her fight is now our fight. Together, we can ensure that her story sparks change and that no other family has to endure this kind of pain. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Together, we can make a difference. Rest in peace, Felita. Your light will never be forgotten.